If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.
Top of the morning, afternoon, or evening, folks. It's Captain Liam here. Pleasure to have Julia Gosling, the director of Ahoy Communications, and also the wonderful host of two wonderful podcasts, Sea Views and the up-and-coming Woman in Maritime. How are you, Julia?
I'm super. It's my evening, Liam. So good morning to you.
Oh, wonderful. We just had an exciting conversation about sailing in the Channel Islands and Isle of Wight. Tell us about your background in maritime sector, because it's 18 years with the Coast Guard. You've really got a backbone information.
Oh, thank you for having me on your show, Liam. Do you know what? It's such a pleasure to come on as a guest as opposed to a host. It's really nice, actually. So thank you for having me. Yeah, so I had 18 years in the Coast Guard here in the UK. So I worked in the press office, communications. So I've worked on search and rescue. I've worked on behaviour change campaigns. I've done a bit of everything really in maritime, because here in the UK, the Coast Guard do shipping, they do fishing safety, they do beach safety, they do the search and rescue.
And training, obviously. Yep.
Managing the training and so forth. But unlike in the US, we have another organization, Border Force, that does drugs and customs and so on. But Maritime and Coast Guard Agency does all the rest. So that was 18 years. So I think I had quite a good introduction to maritime with that job.
Absolutely. All the different characters out there at sea. We talked about all the different stories that the sailors can tell.
Yeah, some of them I can't repeat.
No, absolutely. Well, I've been blessed 25 years in yachting, and I've traveled around the world, so many different ports. But the one thing about people in the maritime sector, we're all quite inquisitive. We're all quite, educated in a sense that we enjoy the environment and nature around it. What are the challenges you faced in those years with the Coast Guard that have led you into your new adventures?
Well, challenges, I would say it was a really interesting job, and I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, I had some absolutely incredible days at work where I couldn't really believe this was my day job, Well,
you talked about going to Monaco. I'm like, that's a good day job.
Yeah, so I've covered a lot of different portfolios in terms of campaigns that I've worked on, and I've done grubby shipping, nice clean shipping. I've done fishing, and I've also done super yachts, so selling the UK flag in terms of the super yacht industry. And that was very nice. I thought, this is the glamorous life, isn't it? So, but I also then kind of found myself heading into more what I would say was interesting areas for me in terms of behaviour change. And I worked quite a lot in fishing safety, commercial fishing safety, which is one of the most dangerous professions in the world. So I wanted a challenge, and I got one.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about fishing, it's because when they're profit driven, a lot of people don't realise when they see the yachting sector, they see all this glamour and all these expenses and these budgets that are unlimited. But the commercial sector of in the maritime business, it's quite frugal. They have to make margins, and they're there to make money. So how do you make that balance between discussing with a fisherman the importance of safety against the importance of profitability? Where does the line stand?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, you and I know, Liam, that behind every part of maritime, it's got to be a business as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And there's always that balance. I mean, you walk behind the scenes on a cruise ship, for example, as I've done when I've gone on inspections, gone behind the scenes, you really see what really happens behind the scenes. They need to make money, and it's the same in fishing. So it is a challenge to change people's attitudes and change their behavior. And I tried a lot of different things when I was in the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. And we found that actually telling fishermen that it was very dangerous and they were going to die, they were completely desensitized to that. Fishermen know that they all know someone, or they've lost someone. You don't need to tell them that, and it doesn't really mean anything to them. And the other thing that I was told when I was working as a civil servant in that kind of realm was that fishermen weren't very clever. And I was horrified, because when I actually went out on boats and I started meeting fishermen and getting to know how they tick, they are not stupid.
No.
They are very, very, they might not have had lots of qualifications in school, right? But they are clever. They are intelligent. They are running a business, and they are making risk assessments, dynamic risk assessments, if you want to call it that, every single minute of the day that they're out there.
Absolutely. And also the sacrifices they make. They go to sea. I mean, people don't realize when you undo those lines from the dock and you go out to sea, the MCA is there to help and save you should you do a Mayday, but you're on your own.
Yep. And or you have the responsibility of your crew. And I've made
the vessel and the asset.
Yeah. It's a lot of responsibility. So there's been some challenges in terms of finding the message, but I actually have always found, and I really believe it, and I've looked at the research into this as well, that you're better to try and change someone's attitude using a positive emotion rather than negative. So many of the campaigns that I've worked on, like in the UK, we had a campaign called Home and Dry, and it was really all about appealing to the pride in your profession as a fisherman, rather than telling you that you weren't doing it right. And I think if you appeal to that, and also being a woman, I'm not afraid to say the word love your crew. I mean, I know people in fishing who do love their crew. I've seen what they buy for them when they're buying the food for the 5 days that they're going out. They do care for their crew in the most part. And I think appealing to people's positive emotions is more effective than negative, as in scaring people.
So I always say,
scared.
A boat's a boat. They're all the same in a way. But when you put people on it, you give it a heartbeat. And that's why I give so much back to the crew that I work for, because the boat doesn't change so much. It's built, it's obviously deteriorating, but the heartbeat of any program is the crew. And how do you maintain that morality? How do you maintain that motivation? You're talking about Sea Views. Tell us about that podcast. How did that start, and what have been some of the highlights of that journey before we go on to your new podcast?
Oh, yeah. So I left the civil service about 3 years ago, and I wanted to venture out into new areas. I stay in Maritime, and I started Ahoy Communications, and I work with some really interesting charities, so some real forward-looking charities in Maritime. And I started working with a charity called the Seafarers Charity, and a couple of other charities as well, but you might have heard of them because they are behind a lot of the international funded charities that will be helping in yachting, for example, and helping with seafarers that might need welfare or mental health assistance. So they fund a lot, well over 2 million each year.
Wow.
2 million
all raised as charities.
Well, they have their own. They're a very long established charity, so they do raise money, but they also have money, and they're really brave about what they spend it on, and they will spend it on things that are structural problems rather than glory projects, and I really admire them for that. But I work with them, and I work with some other charities as well, and it really opened my eyes to what amazing amount of knowledge there is in this industry. And I've met a lot of very, very interesting people, and I just wanted to share some of it. And I wanted other people to meet and know some of these experts in their areas and hear these stories. So that was how it started. And I being a press officer previously as well, I had to be a jack of all trades. So I knew a little bit about everything. But if I didn't, I knew who to ask. And so I found these people that are just the best experts on all kinds of topics. And in Sea Views, we do cover such a range of topics. We cover loads and loads of hot topics in maritime. So we've done super yacht safety, we've done international fishing safety, we've done, fishing boats to tankers. In fact, we've done something right up your street, Liam, is we had a really interesting episode on toxic leadership. Now that sounds really bad. I'm not saying you have toxic leadership. In fact, it was leadership. It was leadership, but it was a little bit more of a sexy name for the episode, so sorry.
Absolutely, yeah, no, I love it. Transparency is the key in leadership, I think.
I do work in PR.
The hook.
Yeah, exactly. So it was really interesting, though, because we had another super yacht captain, Liam. It wasn't you, I'm sorry, but... and also we have a guest on who's a ex-Navy XO. And so it was so interesting to hear about how these issues with leadership, they are faced by everyone. It could be faced by everyone in maritime. And it was as much about trying to be good leaders as the poor ones that we've all encountered. So we cover such a range of topics, but they're not just applicable, I would say, in maritime. Quite a few of them would be applicable to quite a few different businesses and professions, but we've got a theme of safety. So I suppose ultimately we would I envisaged it potentially improving seafarers' working day, maybe saving a life one day. We cover a lot of issues, and we do cover the theme of maritime safety. In most of our episodes. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the most important thing. Every Monday I talk to the crew, and I always say, at the end of the day, we're measured by how many mistakes we make, and that creates incidences that then create an accident. So safety is the most important thing, I think, in this sector. But you talked about leadership. Leadership, I think, in the maritime sector changes so much based on gender, culture, roles, vessels. What are some of the key traits that you've seen in your experience as a host, also in the MCA, that you've looked as leaders and say, what are the key traits you've seen as a successful leader that people can learn from you?
Well, I mean, it has been studied quite well, because obviously the human element is so important in incidents and accidents. And so often it is a contributing factor, if not the cause. So it has been well looked at. And I would say, from what I've seen over the years and been involved in a number of incidents, it's very interesting to see how attitudes have changed. Leaders seem to be more aware now of this human element and how they might be able to do something about it. I would say maybe more open to training to get better, because we can all learn and we can all get better at our jobs. And if you're a leader or you want to be a leader, well, maybe, you're not born always that way.
Yeah, exactly. You have to keep improving.
And actually you hit the nail on the head there. You've got to have an attitude that you can still improve and that you are not there yet, ever.
I think you've also got to be vulnerable, and you've got to be, have uncomfortable conversations with yourself and your crew, because, let's talk about mental health for a minute. As a man, it's a very difficult conversation of how I feel and change how I feel. But, a lot of times with crew, I'll say, does everyone want to do a mental health course or mental health first aid course, which is a great course, by the way. And the feedback is always, no, I'm not interested. So how, as a leader, then do I say, it's important, though? It's important. How do we push the narrative of mental health into an industry that's still very macho and very everything's okay?
Yeah. And taboo still, maybe, for many people to talk about feeling bad or sad. And I don't know. I mean, I think just to be more open like that and to... But also just some of the people that I've spoken to that I think have really been on this leadership journey, they also just take time with people. and, take time to know people. And I'm not talking about just always being someone's friend, but because obviously you have a hierarchy on a vessel when you need it, especially if anything ever goes wrong. You haven't got time to have a long conversation about what you want someone to do. But it's interesting that, that mental health thing is, if you don't really know, if you haven't taken the time to get to know someone below just hello and, then how do you know if they're not quite on form? So, so leadership
I mean, for me,
has to be about that.
I do think so. For me, it's about making sure people have access to the tools. I'm always a big believer in the tools. You have to have the tools, and the tools of, of support, whether it's safety or mental health or success in your role. You have to always, as a leader, push people to get more and more tools in terms of training or access to information. But you've talked about Sea Views. It's been a wonderful podcast. I do love it. You've now branched out into a new podcast called Woman in Maritime. When have you started this journey? Have you recorded one, or when are you moving into that? What led this new transition onto that?
Well, I hope we're going to launch this at the end of January. So it's very, very soon, very imminent. And yes, I have some amazing guests in the pot already on the digital.
Excited?
Yes, I am excited, on the digital cutting room floor, as it were. And it's the reason I wanted to do it was I meet a lot of amazing women. I really do. And it's so interesting getting slightly different perspective on the industry, and obviously understanding it from where I've come from, as a woman working in maritime, where when I first started, it was super male dominated, and so I have seen some changes on shore. But offshore, it's still the same as in the 1990s. So there's only 2% of women, if that, working at sea. And do you know what?
That was 2%. I was going to ask you the numbers. 2%.
Yeah, not in your sector, because obviously you have a different ratio in cruise and in large yacht sector. But
true.
But if you take everything, the average across the whole seafarer community, it's about 2%, if that, of women working at sea. And that is the same as in the 1990s when I qualified as a scientist. So I didn't start off in marketing. I thought I would be working offshore in the oil exploration industry. And I imagined, I'll be on ships and I'll be doing all that stuff. Well, there was like 2% of women working at sea then. And now I'm going into marketing and communications and maritime, and I sort of staggered to find, well, it's still the same. It's still the same numbers. So why don't women aren't
why is it? What's your take on it? Why do you think? Just because it's...
Well, I think there's several reasons. Some of them quite grim. But one is that I have a daughter, and she doesn't see it coming up at school as a career. She doesn't see it being shown to her. She doesn't see that many maritime roles for her. And I think that's an issue. Why don't we let people know a bit more about some of these options? Because they could be very, very interesting careers for people.
Absolutely.
But also we've also got to maybe be a bit more flexible about how people can work at sea, because women might have a time when they want to have a family, but could still have a career at sea if we wanted to, if it was adapted in certain ways. Or there's a lot of roles, even more roles now on shore, where you could still be using those skills. But of course, the other thing that we don't really like talking about, but it's absolutely true, is that the majority of women working at sea have actually experienced sexual harassment, sexual abuse, bullying. And I think that's, you've got to face the fact that that's difficult at the moment. So, and maybe people feel like it might not be for them for whatever reason. But if you look at the shortfall coming that everyone's talking about in maritime, shortfall of seafarers in terms of recruitment crisis coming, then, missing out on 50% of the workforce.
Yeah, well, I think, like you're saying, those numbers are so low that the people experience, the 2% that are in the maritime sector as females are so isolated, and the rate of exposure to incidences are so high for them that it's not a very encouraging industry to go into it for other females. But I give you some positive news in, two things. One, the STCW that's coming out in 2026, sexual harassment and bullying is now a component of that. And for $35, £35, people can do that short course, which the crew of Unbridled are doing next week. But 5 of the 6 pilots last year in Alaska were all females on board Motor Yacht Unbridled. And it was beautiful to have those females on the bridge of a super yacht cruising through Alaska, and their knowledge and their stories. And I'm going to put you in contact with a couple of them because some of their stories were so powerful. They were so powerful, from tugboat captains to cruise ship captains, all these pilots, as female pilots, and the challenges they went through. And the common theme was the same. We had to work twice as hard to get the same position. And that's what made them stand out to me. That was the sad reality.
Yes, but it's great. There are positive stories. And I do think it's just really interesting to get some of these stories told. These are not, these are women that I'm speaking to who could be, as you said, tugboat captain, ice pilot captain, could be a female, maritime or harbour pilot.
Yeah.
Got maritime lawyers. I've got
masters.
a lot of different Navy. I have a naval military lady that's very interesting, but I won't reveal just yet because we haven't recorded it, but we will. And but these stories are very interesting because I think that, in fact, the most interesting stories in maritime can be the ones that just don't usually get told. And women are not always perhaps so good at putting themselves forward, going on to conferences to talk and so on. I do find that they often maybe step back from that a little bit. So I want to give them a platform to just talk about how they got to where they are. And I don't aim to just talk to women in maritime who are right at the top of their careers. I have got them too, but I'm going to be speaking to some of those women who are coming up through, and how did they get there? What have been the challenges so far? So we've got some really interesting women to hear from. And they've had some challenges. We have some candid conversations. But
absolutely. I mean, it's a challenging environment. It's rewarding. Like, the thing is, I don't know, with yachting in the maritime sector, it's hugely rewarding. The positives you get after a safe passage, and the benefits of a career at sea in terms of sometimes tax benefits or sometimes leave ashore. There's huge benefits of it, but the challenges are real. And I think as a woman entering that environment, as long as you're aware and can protect yourself and put yourself in a safe company, I think that would be a good founding start, correct?
Yes, correct. And I think also the attitude of the people around you is so important. So I would really champion, the men who are real allies to women, because it's not just about women maybe having an issue. It's also, how do the men treat the women? How do they be an ally to those women on the ship? And that's very, very important as well. And there's some absolutely brilliant male allies that I have spoken to or worked with, people that have always held me up in maritime and have never treated me like I couldn't do anything or wasn't up to it because I was a woman, and a lot of women have got those stories. So it's not a man bashing thing in any way. It really isn't. And obviously a lot of women are working with great male colleagues who are just, great allies to work with.
Yeah, well, for me, it's the company. I think a lot of times when crew are looking for a job or looking to expand their careers, I think they should spend just as much time focusing on the position or focusing on the company as much as the position, because the company's policies are what we need to rely on We need to rely on that equal opportunity. There's safety in the workplace, and there's networks in that workplace that can support you. Like you're saying, people who support women in yachting, people who they have a space, they have maternity leave, they have different, positives about the company there's historical information that makes sense. But yourself, as as a female in this maritime sector, you've gone through some huge growth periods, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. I mean, like I said, when I started and I first joined the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency in the Coast Guard, I would go to incidents and I would maybe be a press officer on scene or in one of the rooms where we would be discussing what was going to be happening that day or with the incident. And I would often be the only woman there. And that happened quite a lot. A lot of the times that I would go out and about. It then changed, the makeup of people within different organizations. I noticed a lot more female press officers in the police, for example, that we would liaise with, and more female, in the Coast Guard itself. So it did change. But generally, there has been some funny times. There was quite a big incident here in the UK, and we had to set up a press conference on a Sunday in the port of Southampton here. And we'd always do a pre-brief before a press conference, so all the speakers know what they're going to say. And I was chairing that. And before everyone was just arriving, and a chap came in, I'm not going to say where he was from, asked me if I would get him a cup of tea. and I just went and got him one and just gave it to him. And then when I opened it, like chaired this thing, he just looked so awkward.
His face went red.
He hadn't done it deliberately. He hadn't done it to put me down. It was just structurally and, systemically, there were a lot of grey suits in the room. And I was...
exactly. He's like, give me a cup of tea, love. Give me a cup of tea, love. And you're like, yeah, well, okay.
Yeah. So I think, but then I didn't work at sea. I have been on ships visiting but I haven't actually worked at sea. So I suppose that's another environment. And I've really been, I've maybe seen a more positive side of it. And I think in government as well, obviously they have always been quite forward looking in terms of making sure that it's inclusive and diverse. So perhaps I've been lucky there.
Well, look, I'll be honest. The yachting sector, it's beautiful. It's bright, it's glamorous, it's colourful. But the things I've seen, owners, brokers, the industry requests of different, females in this industry, it's not equally balanced. Like you're saying about that cup of tea, it's just not equally balanced. And the demand, of females have to work twice as hard to get the same role. That's the reality. And that's what we're trying to change the narrative. But I want to identify the positives that female or women bring to the workforce. And as a captain, the officers I have that are females are much more organised. They're much more efficient, but most importantly, they care more. They have a lot more pride in their work. And this isn't man bashing. This is just me being transparent of the trends I see. And when we have a female officer, the chart work's done more efficiently, the passage planning's done more efficiently, the engagement with the crew, the drills are done more proactively, and the natural caring of a female in the workplace is something I think a lot of, different vessels in the maritime sector can benefit from. What are other positives you see if we can balance this 2% to 98% out? What are some of the other positives?
Well, look at what makes a good team. It's not having people all the same, is it? That can do the same thing. Else, why bother? You don't need another one that's got exactly the same skills. If you want to build a really effective team and get that 2 + 2 makes 5 result, as in getting more out of it, you want people who are different with different skills and maybe different perspectives. And I think you get that when you have mixed teams and that's not just mixed genders. I'm talking about diversity in other ways as well, so what about neurodiverse workers as well, because they bring another perspective, onto how to deal with problems and find solutions and how to work with people. So you don't want a team that's just made up with the same people with the same attitudes, because you're never going to get that extra
right, actually,
chunk from it.
I think that's the biggest takeaway from this conversation here, is that people really need to understand what you're saying, and basically by having similar like-minded people on board, you don't have the space to create different opportunities to grow. Does that make sense?
Yes. And also, especially in your sector where, you need to provide a service to the client, be it an owner or be it the charter guest, right? You need to have a happy and productive crew. And what is a happy and productive crew? It's where they are healthy and they are also mentally healthy and they are happy and working really well as a team. Because actually, not just, yes, you've got safety issues if people are not happy and productive and doing what they need to do, but also they're not going to be presenting that great service and that great polish and that extra thing that you give to make those experiences amazing for people. So I just think it's all tied in, having a diverse workforce, looking after people. I mean, it's about kind leadership as well, isn't it? But I am looking forward to sharing more of these stories with some of these people that I'm talking to, some of these women that are working in maritime. So
I look forward to it. Looking forward to it. It's coming out the end of January, one of your first episodes.
I hope so. I think maybe 31st of January. So
perfect. Well, excited. I'll keep my eye out. I know we work with Yachting International Radio, who's just phenomenal in what she does for not just the industry itself, but she creates a very neutral and positive platform for everyone to express themselves. And I think it's wonderful credit to her. As a host of now 2 podcasts, what's been your kind of biggest challenge as a host?
It wasn't really a space, funnily enough, that I was very comfortable in when I started, because I was always behind the camera, for 18 years. I'm pushing up the chief executive or a senior Coast Guard commander or to do an interview with the media or whatever, or briefing them, or I'm not the one going in front of the camera.
Well, you look and sound amazing when you do it. You sound like the expert, which I guess you were at the time.
Well, like I said, you had to be a jack of all trades in the press office. So you just had to know a little bit about everything. But that's been pushing me out of my comfort zone to actually come in front of the camera, or initially I was only doing audio podcasts. So that's been quite interesting. I've just had to do it and just thought, okay, I'm just going to do it because actually I want to get those stories out. Yeah. And so that's been one challenge, but also just trying to make people, I really want people to not feel like it's a formal thing. We have we can talk about whatever we want on our podcasts, and it's much more conversational, just like with you, it's a really nice chat. And I have actually found that people who have come on that initially really quite nervous, they do sort of warm up when they realize it's not a media interview. You're not going to get something wrong. Yeah. But that's something you've got to learn, isn't it, Liam? Like, how do you get the best out of someone so they can tell that story, or you can find out what it is that makes them tick?
Yeah, well, for me, it's about the story. Like, the reason I've kind of gone down this path too, and people like yourself motivate me more and more. And it's kind of like, because I think there's so much value in sharing. I think there's so much value in sharing and, making a community and joining. I think so many people trying to accomplish things and sell things and market things. That world, I think, since COVID has become exhausting. Whereas I think now we're building more of a community where the connection has more value than the actual asset of selling a product, and that's where I find the people I've spoken to on the captain's chat have been agents, have been captains, have been crew, have been different like yourself, who've got such a strong experience in the maritime sector that you're giving people an insight into a world that they'd have no idea about. Like 18 years with the MCA, that's incredible, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I think podcasts are great.
Well, it's real people and with real passions about things. And if you start off trying, I don't want to sell anything.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very fortunate that Sea Views is funded by the Seafarers Charity, and it's supported by CHIRP, which is confidential human incident reporting program. So they saw value in it. I was going to do it anyway because I was really passionate about what I was doing. But they said, no, this is really good for us because it gets that safety message and that resource out to a bigger audience. And if you know, start off doing something you're passionate about with people you're interested in, okay?
Yeah.
And everything else will follow.
Yeah, exactly. I think I listened to an article on this weekend that I think it was Nora, I forget her surname, and she says, the older you get, the more you realize your days are getting shorter and shorter, and you've got to spend them doing what you love and invest in that. You know, for me, it's nature. Like you'll be behind the Alaska background. It's on my days off, I go for a hike and I spend with my family, and then I engage in beautiful conversations with you. So I think it's important that people do focus on what they love. But in closing, how can people find you? How can they reach out? How can they be guests on the wonderful new show called Women in Maritime?
Oh, great. Yes. So Sea Views is already on all the platforms. So if you just put in Sea Views, as in the sea, then you will find us. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube. So Sea Views is also on YouTube, and it's on the Yachting International radio channel as well. And also the Women in Maritime podcast will be on the same places. So we will have it out on all the podcast platforms, and it will be available on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. So they can reach out to you through both platforms as well.
Yes, and I'm on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to find me, Julia Gosling, Ahoy Communications, I'd love to hear your story. So please, reach out to me.
Fantastic. And I'm going to get you those 5 pilots' names too from last season. The female pilots we had in Alaska last year, from the moment they boarded till they departed, was just a wealth of knowledge, positivity, experiences, and some of their stories about being a female tugboat captain in Nome, Alaska, really changed the way I kind of looked at women in maritime, to be honest. You know, living and working in these tough environments that men almost couldn't handle, whereas a woman stepped in and took over these roles.
Brilliant. Yeah, please do. That sounds really good. I'm always interested in hearing more and finding more really great guests for Women in Maritime. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your time, Julia. Wish you all the best and look forward to speaking to you again in the future.